Welcome into the March edition of the SRD Ringside here on SportsRadioDetroit.com. Roger Castillo alongside me, our boxing expert, Ray Vipon, as Ray celebrates a opening lap of 15-3, 83%. So do you prefer to go percentage or do you go by 15-3? What is what stands out to you more?
The 83%, I think, is a good number, but 15 out of 18 sounds better.
Yeah, like 50, yeah.
Because, man, I only missed 3.
Yeah, you only missed 3.
Right.
And then let me guess, they were all judgment calls, correct?
Pretty tight fights. Yeah, pretty tight fights. So the first one I missed on is the Kovalev fight in the rematch with Alvarez, Elliot or Alvarez. And I still stand by that call, but Kovalev proved that first fight with Alvarez was kind of a fluke with the stoppage loss. I'm shocked at his age. I felt like every fight he had sort of diminished in punch output. The power didn't seem to be there anymore, and I thought Father Time had caught up. And when he lost to Alvarez in the first bout, I thought that proved it. I'm like, okay, the clock was ticking. But he turned it back, and he put on a really good performance, pitched a very, very near close to a shutout type boxing match. He did a really good job and made me wrong. So I'm not even sad about that. I wouldn't say I get sad about them, but I'm not even upset. I still stand by that decision that I thought Alvarez was going to win that fight. But man, Kovalev, good for you. You're still around, man. I don't know what the personal life situations are going to go on with him because he has some legal issues he's dealing with in his personal life. But barring that, he's still on the scene and he's still very relevant. The Ramirez-Zabata fight was as fun as advertised. That was a real tight decision going into that one, but I went with Ramirez. And then on that undercard, man, Ray Beltran, I love that I get to talk about Ray Beltran so much because he's such my favorite. But he dismantles Okada. I told you, I felt like I predicted this one that Okada was not ready for that type of noise. No one should be ready for that type of noise. Ray Beltran is such a problem. And in your chest, in your face, tons of punch volume. You can hit the guy with a typewriter, and he's probably not going to be hurt. And I felt like Okada just didn't have the experience level or the preparation, because I don't know how you could prepare for something like that. I don't know what you can do in sparring to get someone that comes at you the way Ray Beltran does, and he does not stop. So great win for Ray. Keeps him around. He won that in the most Ray Beltran way possible.
Not to mention for being 37 years old.
Yeah, and like I discussed before, his background was as Pacquiao's sparring partner, and at a certain point, he just sort of took a right-hand turn and decided to forge his own. I mean, he was obviously already a pro fighter, but he was sort of a journeyman type, take opponents that are undefeated prospects and things like that. And at some point, he sort of forged his own path, and he's really crafted this amazing story. They were discussing a lot with his immigration status and him earning his citizenship in the U.S. It's just a really good feel-good story, and the guy fights in a way that you always want to watch a guy fight. And I like seeing him now go up against undefeated guys and then winning and keeping himself in the title picture. It's such a great, exciting guy to watch and keep a thumb on. So Ray Beltran does Ray Beltran things, and I can't wait for him to do it next time. Hopefully by the summer we see him in the ring again.
With potentially Jose Carlos Ramirez, correct?
Correct. And again, I don't know anybody who wants that smoke. I think the kids are saying that now. They don't want that smoke. I can't imagine a person who willingly wants to fight Ray Beltran, and you shouldn't.
Hold on, that vape?
Yeah, with that vape. All right, we don't smoke anymore. We vape now. So, I can't imagine someone who's going to willingly want to take that. He's going to make you, even if you beat him, it's going to be a bad night for you. So we'll see what comes up next with Ray, but great win out of him. And then Anthony Durrell, local fighter out of Flint. He won a strange ending to that fight against Yildirim. There was a cut. I know there was some conversation both on the broadcast and post as to how bad that cut actually was. It was really bad, and I don't know if people are smart when they say things out loud like there was some sort of inside job to get that fight to get stopped. I don't know why Anthony was winning that fight, so for him to want it to go to the cards doesn't seem to make sense because he was already winning. So to look at that cut and say, it should go on, the doctor made that decision. That's not a thing that Team Durrell made. That's a doctor's decision. He looked at it twice, and the second time decided it was according to the doctor, he said he could see the muscle inside of the cut, and he made a decision based on future damage. But it's not like it was a fight that Darrell was losing and needed to find an out on. That out didn't help him in any way, shape, or form. So all this controversy of whether or not the fight should have been stopped, it's the doctor's decision. Team Darrell had nothing to do with it.
It's not going to hurt his future, though, right?
No, not at all. He won a title in that fight. It just looked bad, and some boxing fans will always have an opinion as to how much a person should stay in the fight, which is a weird argument to have because, again, they didn't quit. He didn't say, I can't come back out. The doctor looked at it the second time and determined it was too bad to continue, and it goes to the scorecards.
And really necessarily, for those who don't box at home, that's the kind of opinion you get for people who don't box, correct?
Right.
Okay, so
in most cases, sure.
Okay, I was
but they might see the cut as a casual fan and go, you're a tough fighter. You should be going through that. But that's not even a relevant conversation because the doctor stopped it for the 50th time. The doctor stopped it. The fighter had nothing to do with that fight stopping. The doctor looked at it the second time. Yeah. So, to say that the stoppage, you could say that the doctor made a bad call. You could argue whether or not he should have made that decision. But to throw Darrell's camp in there as if they had something to do with that decision, to me, is farcical at best.
Gotcha.
But it does kind of fit into a weird story arc with the Darrells, is there's been so much. All these fights end in these weird situations. They did a card in Flint years ago, and there was a big brawl outside the ring. Arthur Abraham hits Andre when he's down during the Super 6, and that caused a bunch of nonsense. We all remember Unk taking the cheap shot on Jose Uzcategui post-fight, which led to criminal charges. It's just one of those things that when there's a Darrell fight on TV, you never know how that thing's going to end. But Anthony said this is his last year. He wants to retire. Now that he has a belt, he'll get a title shot again. He'll have a defense. Looks like it'll be Caleb Plant. But I would assume if he's saying what he's saying, that he's just trying to get a check and get out of here, I would assume that the last fight will be later this year, if it is, in fact, Caleb Plant. But he'll defend that title, and according to him, that'll be it. So he had a pretty good career, and if he's done, he's done. That's a decision he has to make. For him and his family, that's his call. But Anthony Darrell announcing that he was probably going to retire at some point this year. And then finally, to recap from February, James DeGale retired after his loss to Chris Eubank. Chunky, as they call him. Chunky had a good career, man. He fought George Groves in only his 10th pro fight. He's got wins over Andre Darrell and Lucien Bate, Caleb Truax. Granted, Lucien Bate was kind of later in his career, but either way, he had a good career. He was okay to watch, I suppose, but he decided after the Eubank loss that he is going to retire. So February was a nice bounce back month. December and January, it appeared as if I've never watched boxing before, and I was just picking blindly. So February, it actually gets me back on track and makes you look like I know what I'm talking about. Let's burn through these fights real quick. And upcoming for March, tonight on Showtime, you have Brian Castano versus Erislandy Lara. That's a 12-round bout for Castano's WBA regular junior middleweight title. Lara has had an incredible career, and he is always a tough out. And you would think on paper that he's the favorite here, but I do not want to sleep on Brian Castano. Not enough that I'd actually pick him to beat Lara. I think Lara is going to take this one, but Castano's not a real known name, so people would assume just go with Lara on this one because you haven't heard of the guy before. But Castano has a really deep amateur background, and he's a very, very good fighter. So I think it's going to be Lara by decision, but I don't think Lara takes this easy. I think this is a real tough fight for him. But I'll take Lara by unanimous decision. On the undercard, big dog Luis Ortiz. He's almost 40 years old, still hanging in there. He's fighting Christian Hammer. That'll be a 10-round bout at heavyweight. Ortiz is just trying to stay around here, man, and get himself either a rematch with Deontay Wilder or maybe a shot at Anthony Joshua, but his name is definitely still in that mix with Joshua Wilder, Fury, Jarrell Miller. Luis Ortiz is definitely hanging around, and a big win over Christian Hammer will remind people that he is still there. I don't know if he could win either of those. Well, actually, I don't know if he'd beat Fury, Wilder, or Joshua, to be quite honest, but it keeps another name in the mix, and that keeps things interesting. I'm kind of glad that the heavyweight landscape is what it is coming off of the Klitschko reign. It was fine to have Klitschko around for as long as he did, but after he retired, I think it's good that you have this many names that could potentially take a belt. It makes things a little more exciting, and it makes things, you look to the future and you can start looking at different matchups of who might fight who, A, B, C, D, E, as opposed to just there's one guy holding all the titles, and he's probably going to beat most people that come at him. So this is great.
When was the last time that we've seen this, Ray? Because it seems like that there's been a lull in the heavyweight division for a very long time.
Pre the Klitschko era, really. I mean,
So,
it was
like
a two-headed giant for 12-ish years. Yeah, Lennox Lewis kind of passed the torch. When he retired, and then Vitaly, the older brother, had a bunch of injury issues, so that's about when he fell out of the scene as well. And Vladimir ran the show for a decade. Nearly. He had a couple losses before that 10-year run, but after he kind of cleaned things up and Emmanuel Stewart sort of tightened up the ship, it was basically Vladimir Klitschko beating everybody. So as he aged and his career, hit that spot where it was time for him to pass the torch, he obviously did to Anthony Joshua. But yeah, I love having this many guys around. I'm not ready to even have a unified title. I like having these 5 or 6 names. And there's a couple prospects coming up who, when these guys, a couple of these guys are getting older, particularly Luis Ortiz. So when they're getting ready to move forward, you're going to have a young crop of guys like Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, Efe Agabu, who's later in this podcast will be mentioned for an upcoming fight he has. There's a bunch of prospects coming up as well. I think the heavyweights are going to be good for a little bit and at least mixing it up. You might not love the product, but at least there's different guys that are vying for the title and continually vying for the title, not just one dude laying waste.
And I'm sure you hear this all the time, too, that the bull crap argument about, well, boxing's dead because the heavyweight division's dead. But I disagree with that. The fact that boxing be able to thrive without the heavyweight division says something about the product.
Accurate. And it used to be that old nomenclature of as the heavyweights go, boxing goes. That's dead now. That's been dead. And you're right. You're absolutely right. That's been dead. Floyd Mayweather killed that. Many other of the small fighters, the light heavyweight division did some damage to that.
I never understood that either.
It was that way, though. It was.
Oh, yeah.
In the 90s, up into the late 90s, that kind of was real. But Klitschko helped that because when you had an Eastern European fighter holding all of the titles for a long period of time, you didn't have a lot of fighting happening in the U.S. for heavyweights. And then lower weight classes took and filled that gap. Guys like Canelo, you know what I mean? Guys like Canelo were selling pay-per-views. Now he's on DAZN, but he just manufactured a 5-year, $365 million deal, and he's a 154 to 160 pounder. You know what I mean? You don't need the heavyweights to run the show anymore. It just helps that they're back now, though. Don't get me wrong. You don't want to ignore them or care that they're not going to be around, but it kind of disproved that theory that you have to have a dominant heavyweight who's getting ratings and pushing pay-per-views. That I feel like that's kind of gone by the wayside now. And you have plenty of action in the lower weight classes and plenty of guys garnering lots of attention. Floyd and Pacquiao, as much as that fight didn't turn out to be what it was, the buzz around it, the pay-per-view buys, it shattered every record humanly possible. You know what I mean? So glad that heavyweights are around, but the lower weight classes definitely showed that they can hold the fort down. Moving forward from tonight's fight, next Friday, that will be March 8th, is ESPN Plus card from London. That'll be Daniel Dubois versus Razvan Kajuno. That's a 10-round bout in the heavyweight division. I have to be honest, Dubois has not quite impressed me yet. Speaking of, that's a good transition by accident to up-and-coming heavyweights.
Well played.
Yeah, thank you. I was purposely accidental because it was just happened to be the next fight on the schedule. But honestly, I've seen him fight at least twice, 2 or 3 times twice. I'm not crazy impressed by him, but he's still got a lot of work to do. He's early in his career, so it's maybe really early to make some sort of a judgment call. But he needs to make a statement in this bout to earn himself some credibility. I got him by mid-rounds TKO. He could do something here to show people that he's definitely going to be a threat. But this is the time to make those decisions and make those adjustments and get himself to a point where if he can spot a weakness, he can adjust it and he can show that maybe he could be a threat. On the undercard of that fight, Mr. Anthony Yarde, as they call him, versus Travis Rees. That's a 10-round bout in the light heavyweight division. Rees has been chirping a lot that Yarde is overhyped, and I actually tend to agree, but I don't think Rees is the guy to derail the hype job. I think Yarde wins this one by late TKO. With this one being in London, Roger, you had something to chime in with the London boxing scene?
Yeah, so the London boxing scene, the fight I watched with you a couple weeks ago with Lennox Lewis, I think people in the United States take for granted that Vegas and by default, and to a certain extent, like Madison Square Garden. But how important is the London boxing scene to boxing?
Well, it's huge now, and it's great for us as U.S. boxing fans because typically, aside from major pay-per-views or if it was a U.S. fighter fighting in the UK, you didn't get a lot of local coverage, whether it was HBO, Showtime, or, like I said, if it was on pay-per-view. It had to be a really big premier fight. But what's been great is with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing, these promotions bringing you the DAZN network over now brings a new competitor into the realm of not only another production or broadcasting outlet, but a new promoter to compete with Golden Boy and Top Rank and PBC, and they're going to compete with ESPN Plus, even though this is an ESPN Plus card. But what I'm saying is you have a wave of promoters and broadcasting outlets that are now here and affordable that give U.S. boxing fans a new way to view local, or I should say produced products from England that we might not have seen before. And I think it's fantastic. I think any type of competition in this situation is fantastic because if you have only 2 or 3 promoters kind of running the show, you get close, even though it wouldn't be a monopoly because you do have 3 or 4 major promoters. But having a new guy show up in town and say, hey, I'm here now. I have a broadcasting outlet and I have all these fighters, and I might actually offer your fighter a ton of money and bring him over to me. That's going to keep people, at least it keeps them honest and maybe making better matchups because they're now vying for the same set of eyes. So the London boxing scene has always been there for London, or UK, I should say, in general, but it's now getting a whole new audience between DAZN and ESPN Plus that are bringing it stateside so that we can watch it. And I think that bolsters those fighters, and it helps cross some bridges between U.S. bred fighters and UK bred fighters to make those matchups easier. Because if, let's say, Roger, you're the UK-based fighter and I'm the US-based fighter, and we both have come to a point in our career, we both have pieces of the title and we're going to fight. Well, where do we fight? We fight in your backyard or mine? Well, you got all these problems to deal with. I think this helps bridge a lot of those gaps because now you have a lot of cross-promotion and a lot of cross-work. So I think it's fantastic. I really do. So that was, where was I at? March 8th?
Yep,
so Saturday, March 9th, Carson, California. You have Sean Porter fighting Ugas for a 12-round bout for Porter's WBC welterweight title. Good news is Porter is such a fun fighter to watch. That dude does not do boring. He brings a really fantastic, fan-friendly, even casual fighters or casual fight fan type, friendly type of style, and I don't think this fight will be any different. Good to see Porter keeping himself in the mix. Got Keith Thurman, the big fight coming up with Errol Spence and Mikey Garcia. Porter needs to stay around and let them know he's not going anywhere, and I think this is going to be a really good fight for Porter to showcase that. I got Porter by a late-round TKO. And as I mentioned before, I was going to mention that F.A. Agaba is fighting Amir Mansour. That's an 8-round heavyweight bout. F.A. might be the dude. I like him. It's real early to tell, and I don't like making judgment calls that quick based on resume that can be kind of thin earlier in a fighter's career. But he is 8-0 with 8 KOs, and 7 of those are in the first round, and one of them famously being Curtis Harper that left the ring before the fight even started. So,
what?
Yeah, there's a story of whether there was some promotional issues there, but yeah, he walked into the ring and then just turned around and walked away. And why and how has been debated, but it's still a fun story to tell that a guy walked in the ring, looked across the ring, and said, "No, man, deuces, I'm out." But I think he's a really promising heavyweight prospect, and the really good thing I like about this bout with Amir Mansour is this will be a good sort of litmus test to find out where he's at. Mansour's a good veteran. He's got a lot of experience. He's not going to come into this fight intimidated or concerned about power and things like that. He's going to be able to come in and give him a decent fight, hopefully, and I think this will be a good measuring stick to figure out where he's at. I think he has great potential, but this will be a good fight to find that out. That being said, though, I'm still going to pick him to beat Mansour by a mid-rounds TKO. That same night, speaking of DAZN Network, they'll be putting on a card in New York. This will be Dimitri Bivol versus Joe Smith Jr. in the main event. That's a 12-round bout for Bivol's WBA light heavyweight title. I was always a supporter of Joe Smith Jr. He's kind of got that Rocky story thing going on. Working class construction worker who goes and takes the title from Hopkins and then, goes back to work on Monday. And there's that really cool picture of him at the construction site with the belt over his shoulder and standing there like, hey, man, no, I still got to do construction because I granted I won a title.
It's such a great story.
Yeah,
too.
It's amazing, man. That picture is so good. But he's been out for a while. He lost to Sullivan Barrera after he'd beaten Hopkins. So he's only got one W since. He's got a low-level win against Melvin Russell. And I don't think Bivol's going to be the guy that's going to lose to him. Bivol's a really, really solid, all-around good, very, very technically sound fighter. And I don't think Joe Smith Jr., even at his most active, would have a chance to win, let alone someone who has been pretty inactive since that title win against Hopkins. So I'm going to take Buvol by unanimous decision. On that undercard, you have Maurice Hooker versus Mikel Lespierre. That's a 12-round bout for Hooker's WBO junior welterweight title. I think it's an easy defense for Hooker. Lespierre has basically like a nothing resume. I think he's going to get outclassed in this bout. I don't think it's a real issue. I'll take Hooker by a unanimous decision. March 15th, DAZN Network again, $9.99 a month. You should get your subscription. There's a title bout with Tevin Farmer fighting Jono Carroll. That's a 12-round bout for Farmer's IBF junior lightweight title. I rarely like to bank on fighters who have really no notable wins and a thin resume coming on the road to fight somebody. That's not a pick I tend to make, unless I know something about them or have seen something of them that would convince me otherwise. With Carroll, I don't see that. Tevin Farmer is a really good fighter to have to come deal with on the road when you haven't really fought anybody notable, and I think he's going to be outclassed grandly in this fight. I think Farmer cruises. So I'll take Farmer by UD. In that undercard, Katie Taylor is fighting Rose Volante. That's a 10-round bout. This will be for the WBA, WBO, and IBF lightweight unification title. You know, Katie Taylor, a lot like Carissa Shields, Michaela Mayer, and Cecilia Brockhouse, is really putting a light back on women's boxing. I think it's been great. It's always a problem with women's boxing, though, is that each division is a little thin in competition, so you tend to get one very good fighter who tends to dominate all of the not, competitive fighters in that division. But hopefully, maybe down the road you kind of get a Ronda Rousey type effect where Ronda was doing the same thing, sort of beating up on lesser opposition for a while, but that sort of brought in more fighters who then bolstered those weight classes. And you kind of saw that Ronda started losing fights at that point. So maybe 4 or 5 years from now, this wave of women's boxing is going to inspire a second wave to come in, which could come in rather quickly. I mean, if you're already athletic, or you've already been training to be a fighter, this could just light a fire to get you more motivated to maybe take a shot at it and show you that it's possible. It's hard to say, but I'd like to see that these 3 or 4 names, with Taylor, Shields, Mayer, and Brockhouse, the torch that they're leading, I'd like to see that bring in more. And then when you fill out these weight classes, then I think truly you could have women's boxing get to the point where they're going to get closer to equal pay because the ratings will be there. But right now, like I said, it's just tough, and I don't blame the fighters. It's just if you have a very good fighter in the weight class dominating that weight class, and everyone knows that everyone else in that class probably doesn't have a shot, and her only contemporary is 2 or 3 weight classes above or below her, it's very hard to make compelling competitive matchups. I would say the Christina Hammer-Clarissa Shields fight is the closest we're going to have currently in a women's boxing weight class, where you have people who are probably closely set skill-wise, even though I think Shields is going to run her over. I think Hammer is the closest competitive-wise of any of those weight classes, but we'll see how the future holds for it.
I was going to say, too, because it seems like with even the WWE and UFC have come closer to kind of equalness across the board. Was that fair to say? Because, even, the Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey thing is a fascinating angle. Yep. Even though, real or not, it doesn't matter. But the way they're doing that right now, that they're equals in the ring. And UFC, I've always admired the UFC for that, but I would love to see that in boxing. Yeah,
and I think that transition, the same type of thing can happen, even though, obviously WWE scripted and it is what it is. But for almost ever, women's wrestling was mid-card, bathroom break type material.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you have someone like Becky Lynch opening Raw. You know what I mean? She's not only opening Raw, but she's been cross-branding. She's been doing Showtime as well. So, Showtime, sorry, SmackDown. I can't talk wrestling and boxing.
No, but
she's been opening both shows, and you don't have a John Cena or a main name. You have Becky Lynch opening the show, closing the show, having these pay-per-view moments that are getting equal attention as to where the men were, and I think that's fantastic. And all 3 sports between MMA, boxing, and wrestling have seen that,
and that's huge, especially for wrestling too. Because as you recall, it was just usually just bra and panties, and the Raw era was just farcical at best. In terms of the whole
Attitude Era?
Yeah, Attitude Era.
Sure.
Yeah. The beginning of that, yeah.
That was all sex-driven.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wasn't skill-based. It wasn't storyline-based. It was all objectification, and where it's come to now is fantastic. So we'll see. Give it a couple of years. I hope these divisions fill out. But as for now, I got Katie Taylor in that fight. I don't, again, in her weight class, I don't quite think she has a contemporary. And I feel bad if they have to make these bouts where either someone has to go up a weight class and a half and the other person has to cut a weight class and a half, because then you're diminishing both people to a position that they don't naturally fight in, which is not going to really give you a fair assessment of where they are, because they're both either putting on a bunch of weight they don't need to put on or coming down in weight where they normally wouldn't. So I'd like to see more competitive matchups in each of those weight classes. But either way, tune in, man. Katie Taylor's fun to watch. But the big fight of the month is Saturday, March 16th in Arlington, Texas, in the house that Jerry built. Jerry World.
Jerry World.
Though I do think it's cool they do fight. They've done fights there for so long. Pacquiao kind of took the torch on that one, but that's a cool place to put 80,000 people into for a boxing match.
Definitely,
because boxing's dead, right? Sorry, I always do those.
No.
I always put those little jags and pokes in there.
But it's well deserved.
Sure. So the main event: Errol Spence Jr., Mikey Garcia, 12-round bout for Spence's IBF welterweight title. This is one of the rare moments. Not rare moments. They're not rare at all. But size matters, dude. It really does. And Garcia is an exceptionally good fighter who I think has a skill set that is complete and above average in basically every category. But the problem is I think Spence does too, and Spence is way bigger. And I honestly didn't realize that how much bigger, to the extent that Spence was bigger than Garcia, to the first time they did the showdown on that Fox PBC show, and they stood in front of each other. And I really went, oh my God, Spence could be a very normal, average-sized junior middleweight, let alone the fact that he's fighting at 147. So I think, unfortunately, Garcia climbed the ladder a little too high in the weight classes. I don't discredit him for that. Fine, you take the path you want to take. But I think in this case, you have a relatively equal skill set that's going to be overpowered by literal overpowered, because Spence is just so much physically bigger and stronger. I don't think Garcia is going to be able to hurt him, and I think that's where I think Spence is going to figure that out early, that whatever Garcia hits him with is not going to be enough, and that's going to swing that to where I think Spence can just start walking him down. I don't think he finishes him per se. I got Spence by decision in this bout, but I don't think Garcia is going to be able to handle that size discrepancy very well. On that undercard, local fighter Jalen Love, who has spent most of his career fighting in Vegas, at least in camp in Vegas, is fighting David Benavidez. This is a 10-round bout in the super middleweight division. So Benavidez looks to get back on track after getting stripped of his title. He failed a drug test, random drug test for cocaine, and he has adamantly apologized, said it was a terrible mistake. He's a young guy. I'm not going to really go piling on to the dude. He made a mistake. At least it wasn't a performance-enhancing drug. It was recreational. I always feel like there's more of a pass given when you're just doing drugs because doing drugs, not the I'm doing drugs to gain an advantage over my opponent type thing. But this is his get-back fight. He was supposed to fight Andre Durrell originally, but that went by the wayside with that positive drug test. I don't think Jalen is going to do well in this bout. I've always supported him. Jalen's a great dude, and he made a lot out of his career, coming out of Inkster and fighting locally. But David Benavidez is still a very hard-punching boxer-puncher type, and I think he's bigger than Jalen, and I think he's stronger than Jalen. And unfortunately, I'm going to take Benavidez by a mid-rounds TKO, even though I always apologetically pick against a local fighter when they're getting a big TV time fight. Also, Luis Neri on that undercard versus McJoe Arroyo. That's a 10-round bantamweight bout. I got Neri by a mid-rounds knockout. And then Chris Arreola making an appearance against Jean-Pierre Augustin, 10-round bout in the heavyweight division. I feel that it's too bad that Arreola didn't stay retired. I don't know what he's going to do outside of these types of bouts. He's only fought once since his loss to Wilder, and I don't know if he's thinking he's going to make a push here, but I don't know where he fits in. Maybe he could win a slugfest with a guy like maybe Miller or Ortiz, but I don't see that happening either. He's looked really bad. His training has obviously always been in question. His conditioning has always been in question. He doesn't have a shot against the big three, whether it's Wilder, Fury, or Joshua. So maybe he's just trying to make some noise. I don't think he's going to win this fight. Augustin's an unbeaten Haitian fighter fighting in the U.S. I don't know if he's quite the guy to make a run, but I think he's going to beat Arreola, I apologize. So I'm going to take Arreola to lose in this bout, maybe by mid-rounds TKO. I just think he's too untrained, unconditioned. I expect him to come in pretty sloppy on this one. And maybe this will be it then. This loss, if it is indeed a loss, will convince him that being retired is probably the best bet. Moving forward, March 17th, ESPN Plus. I don't know, Roger, you got any St. Patty's weekend?
St. Patty's
What do you got going on?
I don't think I got anything going on.
Me either. I'm Canadian. I don't do shit. I don't do it.
I got. Oh, you know what?
Everyone's Irish. I go, no, I'm not. Not me.
I have something till about 9 o'clock, but I'm free after that. So.
All right.
Well, the 16th rather. But.
I'm still dry till April 13th, so I cannot.
Oh, that's right.
Partake. I cannot partake in any. Maybe some food. I could do some corned beef and whatnot.
Let's just do what we do.
Yeah, but I can't
eat good.
No beers, no whiskeys. I gotta be a good boy. Punishment fits the crime, though. You do the crime, you do the time. Self-imposed dry spell after. I may have theoretically, this is all hypothetical, even though there's people who can absolutely prove this happened. I may have gotten really, really intoxicated to the point of being useless the entire next day and leaving my poor wife to tend for our children. And then 2 weeks later, doing the exact same thing. But you'll be proud of me, Roger. I cleaned off an entire fifth of Jameson all by myself.
I've not. You know what? I've seen you do that before.
So you're not impressed?
No, because
repeat.
You know, like
moment.
Yeah, it's a repeat moment. I mean, I was impressed the first time. The second time, I was like, all right. So
oh, that's just the thing this dude does.
Well, that's not a thing. No, I'll just say like the second time, it's like. All right, I've already seen that trick. I don't need to see that trick again, necessarily.
If a bunch of people walk in this room right now, I'm going to know that you're planning an intervention. And I don't have a problem, Roger. I could quit whenever I want. And I did, see? Self-imposed dry spell. Yeah. I'm off till after my half marathon in April.
Training purposes. There you go.
Right.
That's what I thought you were implying. I had no idea about the other stuff. You could have said that, I would have.
Oh, it actually is sort of training purposes, and coincidentally that I'm sort of in trouble because I got too drunk in January. Sorry, wife. Anyway, Mick Conlon fighting Ruben Hernandez, 10-round featherweight bout. Mick Conlon continues his career forward. Going to face the tough veteran Hernandez. I am still a fan, have been a fan, and will always be a fan, particularly back when he's flipping off Olympic judges for screwing them. That's kind of when that boy won me over, and I will be a unapologetic Mick Conlon supporter. I think he's great. I think he's great for the sport. I really want them to put more of a spotlight on his personality, too. The more he kind of breaks into fights like this to get himself known in the U.S., the better. But I need Mick Conlon to be talking more and interviewed more on television so people can see him, because I think that's a personality that bodes well for the sport. So, yeah, give me Conlon by UD. That should be an easy fight for him. Moving to March 23rd. You got Kubrat Pulev versus Bogdan Dinu, and I got to yell at Mr. Dinu. That's a 10-round heavyweight bout, sorry. I picked him to upset Jarrell Miller back in November, and I was very, 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 one more very wrong. But now he faces Pulev, whose only loss was back to Vlad back in 2014, and I don't know. This is a tough fight to pick. I suppose it should be a pretty good fight because I think they both have very weak defensive skills. They both can punch, so that usually spells a recipe for a pretty spectacular knockout. I'm going to take Pulev by late rounds TKO only because since Dinu screwed me once and didn't beat Miller like I had picked the upset, I refuse to lend him my support and pick him in this fight. So I'll take Pulev by a late rounds TKO. On that undercard, Jesse Magdaleno versus Rico Ramos, 10-round featherweight bout. Magdaleno looking to bounce back after his loss to Isaac Dogbe. He's fighting veteran Rico Ramos. That should be a pretty good bounce back fight for him. Get him some work and keep him in the picture. I got Magdaleno by mid-rounds TKO. And we're getting close to the end of the month here. March 24th, the Peterson brothers on FS1. Lamont Peterson fighting Sergey Lipinets and his brother Anthony fighting Argenis Mendez. It's a tough call with this Lipinets fight because I'm not super sold on Lipinets. I don't have 100% faith in him to be able to beat Lamont, but Lamont's days are obviously well behind him. But Lamont's always a tough out. I'm going to go with Lipinets, but I did so sort of begrudgingly. I'll take him by UD. And Anthony Peterson on the undercard, sure. It was interesting to me still to this day, looking back, when those two guys were coming up together, the brothers were always fighting on the same cards, a lot of ESPN, Friday Night Fights type cards. And it was always Anthony who was sort of projected to be the one that would have the more successful career and maybe win more world titles and kind of be the better of the two. And it happened quite the opposite that way. obviously remembering the Anthony Peterson, Brandon Rios fight where he did a lot of ball punching, which is rude. I mean, aside from it being against the rules, it's just downright rude. You know how bad it hurts. You've been hit there before. So fine, I got him beating Mendez by a mid-rounds TKO, but I don't think this puts Peterson anywhere moving forward in any type of big picture type situation. March 30th, Alexander Vosdik versus Ngumbu. It's a 12-round bout for Vozdik's WBC light heavyweight title bout. Ngumbu has a world of experience, but most of his fights were occurring in France, and he really doesn't have any wins against anyone notable. A couple losses against notable guys, but no Ws. I don't think it's a very tough night for the very high-powered, very fun Vosdik. Unfortunately, he's coming off that win where he put Stevenson into the coma, which he has somewhat recovered from. But Vosdik, in the camp of the Ukrainian wave, Alexander Usyk and Vasyl Lomachenko, Vozdik's a force, and I will, as of now, I can't see anyone I would pick him to beat. A guy like Elliott or Alvarez, I think he beats Kovalev. I think the light heavyweight division has a problem with him, and I don't think that Ngumbu is the guy. So Vosdik rolls, I think, in this one. I'll take a mid-ish to late rounds TKO, maybe like 7-9, 6-8, right in that ballpark. Then March 30th, you got dueling cards on both the DAZN network. One is from Liverpool, England. You got Liam Smith versus Sam Eggington, 12-round junior middleweight bout. Liam Smith has one of the, just like James DeGale being called Chunky, I always laugh when Liam Smith is called Beefy. I don't know how you come up with that fight name, but he's Liam Beefy. So, yeah, Chunky makes me laugh, and Beefy makes me laugh.
Beefy just thinks of Chef Boyardee.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I associate with.
But you know why it makes me giggle, Roger?
Why is that?
Because I'm a child, and those things make me giggle. So I don't actually think this is going to be a very good fight. I want to talk about it because it's on, we talk about every fight that's going to be on a major U.S. outlet, and DAZN is broadcasting that. So we'll discuss it, but I'm not telling you not to watch, but I'm not telling you to get mad at me if you watch and it sucks. But I'll take Beefy by UD on that one. And then closing out the month, March 30th, also again, like I said, on DAZN, they're doing two different cards. That Liverpool card will probably be around 5:30 Eastern. And then the card in Indio, California will about 9 o'clock, I'm guessing. Usually about 9 they start those cards. Main event about 11-ish. But you got Ryan Garcia. Apparently a very recently changed opponent, which I just saw yesterday, that he's fighting Haskell Rhodes instead of Jose Lopez. That's a 10-round bout in the lightweight division. Garcia has made a bunch of noise lately, both in and out of the ring. He has a very unique social media relationship with him and his fans, and I don't even mean that as a pun, because before he got one of his Instagram followers pregnant, I would have still said that sentence.
Wait, what?
No, I got you. I got to tell you guys, if you're listening, I framed that just for Roger to laugh at that. Yeah, the story goes is that he cheated on his girlfriend with one of his Instagram followers, and she is pregnant with his child. But he and his mom both go live on social media and openly have discourse and conversations with fans and not fans alike. But like I said, all jokes aside, before this weird Instagram pregnancy controversy-ish, I guess it's not a controversy, it's just a thing that happened. But Ryan Garcia is very connected to his fans in social media, which is obviously a thing that happens more now than it did previously. And he's made a bunch of noise in the ring. He's been calling out Gervonta Davis. He wants some big fights. He's very flashy, hence the nickname. But he's very flashy. He's very good, a very good fighter. My only concern is all of these things that he has in his personal life and the fact that he's very young. I wonder how much of that might distract him and how much that might draw from camp and maybe cause a problem for him in preparation for a fight. So hopefully he's staying focused. This isn't really a fight that I think he would be at risk of losing should that be the problem. But I'd like to kind of see him mature both as a fighter and as a human and grow and learn from what's happening around him. And that's probably only going to come with age and time. But really what happens in his personal life is none of my business. I just wonder how much it affects him professionally. I like him
quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, and he's fun, man. He's a really fun fighter to watch. He's extremely talented, very athletic. He's clearly a gifted guy who has a lot of ceiling ahead of him to move towards before he gets to the big time. But he has a lot of potential and a lot of room to grow. I don't think calling out Gervonta Davis right now is the right call. I think he needs a couple more fights and a little more development time. I think that would be a mistake if they made that fight like next. Davis is no joke, and I don't think Garcia is quite ready for that smoke. Right, Roger?
That's nice David Caruso.
Yeah, maybe another glasses on. Maybe another fight or two before the Davis fight would materialize. But either way, I'll take Garcia to win this bout against Rhodes by mid-round TKO. And opening that fight is a WBO Junior Law flyweight title. This is Angel Acosta versus Ganigan Lopez. That's a 12-round bout, obviously, since it being a title fight. And I will take Angel Acosta by mid-rounds TKO.
I love your Spanish pronunciation, and I mean that sincerely. Not like in a
I try.
funny,
I try to do it the right way.
You do.
Yeah, and a lot of times,
you do a better job
honestly,
than I do, and I speak the language.
And a lot of times, like even with like a lot of the European pronunciations and the Hispanic pronunciations, I try to like listen to how they're introduced into the ring when they fight, because obviously guys like Jimmy Lena Jr., Michael Buffer, they practice those things and get the direct pronunciation from the fighter. So yeah, as much as I can, I do my best to say it as the fighter would want it to be said in the best Canadian way I can do it. So
use that French, man.
Yeah, you got it. Oui?
Oui.
Oh, my character French is really bad and laughable and probably offensive to anyone who actually speaks the language. But that wraps up March, so hopefully I can have some sort of a replication of my pick success. We'll see what happens, but it's a very, very, very busy month with Fridays and Saturdays almost consistently having about all month. So get your DAZN and ESPN subscriptions. Cost you $15 a month, and ESPN Plus has tons of non-boxing coverage. You get an NHL out-of-market game, NBA out-of-market games, all the entire 30 for 30 libraries on there. Lots of original content shows. Dan Rayfield has the Boxing Beat, which I guess is on like hiatus, but they were doing a show on there. Max Kellerman has a boxing show. DAZN also does Bellator and a lot of MMA stuff, so there's not just boxing reasons to get these subscriptions. There's tons of other sports-related.
Soccer, too?
Yeah, you're right. Yep, yeah, DAZN does soccer as well.
Yeah, they do a really good job.
And some cricket. I tried to watch cricket. I can't figure it out.
I know how it works.
Yeah.
But the rules are so, like, it's like, why the hell am I doing this?
Yeah.
I can watch rugby, no problem. I can watch ping pong. Like, have you ever seen ping pong?
Yeah, competitive ping pong's bonkers.
Or even competitive badminton.
Yeah.
Crazy.
No, it's dumb.
Or handball.
Yeah.
Handball's huge in Europe.
Yeah. No, I can't play any of those sports. Yeah, nor do I understand how there's handball, scored.
Though, handball, I think we'd be kings at handball.
Will we?
Yeah, because, I mean, you're shooting in the large net. You ever seen that?
No.
I'll have to show it to you.
You have to educate me on some handball.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens, and I will reconvene with you all in a month.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, sorry, real quick. Speaking of next month's episode, we're going to have Pete Spivak on. Awesome. He is going to discuss the big final title fight that we've been waiting for with Clarissa Shields and Christina Hammer. That's a huge fight on Showtime. He will be in the studio. He has covered a bunch of her fights locally. That's actually where I met Pete, was at the first or second Showtime card they did here in Detroit. I think
it's the second one.
I think it was the second card. But yeah, I met Pete there, and we've become pretty good buds since talking boxing, and he has a lot of insight into her career and has covered her before. So Pete will be on next month to talk about the Clarissa fight. But yeah, big fight next month for a local fighter, and we always like to see that happening. So see you then.
Yep, see you then.